I'm going to start off with asking you.
Do you know a girl called Katie Leonard? Yeah? Describe each other as friends then.
I haven't done anything.
What have you done?
The arrest and the subsequent journey of 13-year-old boy Jamie Miller on the Netflix show Adolescence explored haunting themes of online radicalization, toxic masculinity, and the influence of the manosphere on adolescent boys. It has reignited debates on technology and social media's role in a kid's life and how one should regulate it. But to avoid falling into this trap of drawing false correlations and conclusions based purely on how we feel about the issue, I caught up with Victoria Goodyear. She has recently co-authored a study which was published in the peer-reviewed medical journal Lancet, looking at how school mobile phone policies affect students' mental health, academic performance, physical activity, and sleep. It also looked at smartphone and social media usage. The study draws on data from more than 1,200 adolescents aged 12 to 15 across the UK. Goodyear is an associate professor in physical activity, sports and health at the University of Birmingham in UK, and she's also focused on researching digital technologies in the context of adolescents' health and well-being. In today's episode, we discussed her research and how she thinks we can help kids navigate a world where smartphones have become like an extension of our bodies. It's Tuesday, April 8th. I'm your host, Apurva Mittal, and you're listening to The Morning Brief. So, Victoria, can you tell us briefly what inspired you to undertake this particular study on usage and permissibility of phone in schools and its impact on adolescents?
So, starting this study out, we knew that there was increasing prevalence of mental health in adolescent population concerns, particularly around lower levels of mental well-being and worsened anxiety and depression. We also knew that there is increases in technology use among adolescents, particularly their access and ownership of smartphones and their use of social media. There has been a trend to associate these two together and to suggest that there is an association between mental health and smartphone and social media use, but the evidence is not clear-cut. At the same time, many countries, many contexts are looking to ban the use of smartphones and social media for adolescents, particularly in schools, and with some contexts delaying access until later in teenage years.
Victoria, personally as well, as a researcher, of course, you're seeing these things, but even personally, what are you really seeing around you in your work, in your conversation? If you can, anecdotally set a scene for us when it comes to your area of research, which is technology and adolescence.
Well, what we see from our area of research is that they are using their phones and social media to access information, play games, interact with friends, and that is going inside with spending a lot of amounts of time on phones and social media during the day.
Right. And there is that argument though that, unlike you or me, the kids today are coming in a world where this is just a norm. Social media is not new. Technological tools are way of life. So how does one really cope or understand how to deal with something which is causing you harm? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think what we're looking at in this article, and particularly the article published in the British Medical Journal, is we're arguing that we need to support adolescents through a right respecting approach. That involves one aspect of that is education and some support in developing their digital skills so that they feel in control of their social media. And this means that in some ways mitigate some of the risks and harms themselves but also they can explore the benefits and realize the benefits and have it as a tool that actually can support their well-being at the same time.
Right. And I would, come back to this mitigation point. But before that, let's dive into your study. Can you tell me how you went about the study? How did you approach it? I've, of course, read through it. But for the listeners, if you can just briefly explain your methodology and how you went about the process.
Yeah, so we compared outcomes in adolescents who attended a school with a phone ban compared to those without a phone ban. What we did was we collected data from them on how they use their phones and social media, so how much time they spend on them. We also asked them to report on their levels of mental health and well-being, and we asked them to wear a watch for a week to track their physical activity and sleep levels. And we asked their teachers to report on their disruptive classroom behaviour levels and also their attainment in English and maths.
Right. So, when it comes to the findings, I think you found that students in both environments did not show much variation when it comes to impact on mental health, depression, anxiety, or even performance in school. Can you talk to me about what were the key takeaways from the study? And as you reflect on those takeaways, what do you make of it?
Yeah, sure. So what we found is that there's no difference in outcomes for adolescents who attended a school with a phone ban compared to those that attended a school without a phone ban. So adolescents who attended a school with a phone ban only lowered the amount of time they spent on their phones by 40 minutes on phones and 30 minutes on social media. Now, we were finding that adolescents were spending 4 to 6 hours on their phones across the whole day and 2 to 4 hours on social media. The second finding that we found from the study was that we found the increased amount of time was spent on phones and social media was associated with worse of those outcomes in all of those areas. So the more time you spend on your phone and social media, the worse your mental health and well-being. So the implication from this study is that time is an important focus for improving mental health and well-being and education and physical health outcomes.
Do you have any suggestions for what could be done within the premise of the school or even at homes? Although this may not be your area of research directly, but I'm sure, like, if you can sort of explain that, what are those things that can be done to help the kids bring that balance in their life?
Sure. So we need to focus on education and age appropriate design. So education is about preparing adolescents with the digital skills and competencies so they can participate, but also supporting them to work together as peers and supporting schools to deliver that education. And that means designing technology with children's well-being in mind.
So I think there was news, and please correct me if you're aware and I'm wrong, that Australia is considering a ban on YouTube for kids. Though this is not mobile directly, but a lot of kids access YouTube and Instagram on mobile phones. In any context, do you think a ban is the right approach for adolescents?
Well, what we found in our studies was that banning phones alone are not enough to tackle the negative impacts. So we need to move beyond debates beyond the sole focus on bans and start to think about that broader and holistic approach.
Right. But the interesting part is, like, if even if I take out social media out of the equation, even when we were growing up pre social media, comparison with other people or bullying was there. And I guess it's become even more prevalent now. For those kind of aspects, to create like a safer digital environment, or one cannot really prevent someone from comparing themselves to others. I guess for these kind of emotions that kids feel, is there any solution per se or a framework that can be applied?
Well, what we can, a framework in terms of age appropriate design, there is some work in the UK underway, particularly the UK Digital Futures for Children. And it has guidance for 11 key principles to ensure children's rights are at the centre of technology design. And some of those aspects include a focus on acting in the best interests of children, things like agency to reduce compulsive use, And things like modifying the algorithms and the content personalization. So, to ensure that the content that reaches children can be often be biased for commercial or political reasons. And that in itself is an infringement of their freedom of choice, and this can affect their decision making and then ultimately their rights and well-being. So it's about using kind of these frameworks that are already in place that align with children's evolving capacities and prioritize their well-being.
Right. So while a ban is not the right approach, a collaboration is needed both from big tech as well as on the policy side to create this environment for kids.
Absolutely. The challenge is obviously with the technology companies, there's for-profit incentives, and we really need to be working together for legislation and for governments to require technology companies to show how they are delivering on children's rights to support development and ensure that appropriate safeguards are in place and all the services that are accessible to children.
So, Victoria, we're talking at a very interesting or, rather coincidental time. This show, Adolescence on Netflix, has shot to great popularity, and it's put in front and center the effects of bullying on social media, the insecurity it can bring in young people. In light of the show, I mean, I don't know, have you watched it? First, I would like to ask.
Yes, I've watched it, yeah.
So, in light of your research, what did you think about the show and what it means?
So I think what the show does well is it talks about the different areas of an adolescent's life. So it talks about the connections between home and school and some of the access to content in technology. So, in that context, there is a need to join up the different areas of children's lives and adolescents' lives in order to support their health and well-being.
Right. Got it. Victoria, taking this ahead, could you also point out some gaps or challenges that you faced in the research or the results when you found them out? And also, how do you intend to take this ahead?
Sure. So we were able to compare outcomes in adolescence without it having, for example, a novelty effect on them, so immediate change. So what we can say is that we observed adolescents in their natural settings, looking at how they use their phones and social media. And from that, we were able to estimate that school phone policies were not making a difference to overall levels of mental health and well-being and other health and associated educational outcomes. In terms of the next steps, we need to think more about in-school and out-of-school use. And we need to move debates beyond a sole focus on bans and think about a broader and holistic approach. And we also need to be thinking about the wider aspects of their lives and not as isolated spaces or activities.
Do you think it would be fair to say that the study sort of indicates the situation that is prevalent even in different regions, say like India or America? Or it's not correct to sort of, say that?
Yeah, I think the outcomes are comparable across, in a sense that we know that there is a general direction to ban phones and social media in schools in those contexts. But I think based on the principles of schools and the principles of time adolescents spend on their phones, they are pretty comparable trends across different contexts.
Right. Tell me a little bit about the feedback. I'm sure, this has been such an important study you've done. People from all over the world might be reaching out to you. If you can share any anecdote or, any specific person either from the school or the policy side who reached out as a result of the study and what their feedback has been.
Yeah, so this study did receive a lot of attention, and that was across the media and policy as well. And what we're really happy with is it started a discussion on how we can move the debates forwards and focus more than on bans and focus on a broader and holistic approach to children's well-being.
These findings take an important meaning as developed nations around the world are formulating policies to regulate smartphones and social media usage for minors. In the US, multiple states have enforced restrictions on phone usage in school, and Australia last year banned social media usage of kids under 16. Closer to home in India, the Delhi High Court recently refused to ban smartphones in school, stating they don't harm teaching, discipline, or the classroom environment. it is a sign that we may be on the right track. Another study from the University of South Florida has found that kids with smartphones report higher well-being than those without smartphones. So it's clear that there are no simple answers. But one thing is obvious. Supporting kids in today's tech-driven world requires collaboration across all spaces they inhabit. Schools, families, communities, homes, alongside a more active role from big tech companies. In this increasingly complex world where there is no running away from technology, a ban may not be the right way forward. That's it from today. I'm your host Apurva Mittal. Today's episode was produced by Rajas Nayak and our sound editor is Amrit Reggie. The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday. Do tune into ET Play for all audio content including The Morning Brief. You can listen to our podcast on all major podcast streaming platforms. Thank you for listening and have a nice day ahead. All external sound clips used in this episode belong to their respective owners. Credits are mentioned in the description.